and dimensions that are relevant for feedback. Again, equally critical. We need to think about feedback when we are promoting learning analytics in terms of theory-informed design. How we are and what type of theory are we trying to use? First of all, we need to think about what type of learning activities we want to activate by providing certain feedback. What is really comes down is what type of instruction we provide to students. And the other one is equally critical is to ground in the literature. So just to kind of prove the point that I'm not really against visualization, I'm going to cite a work that was done, excellent work by Alyssa Wise, a colleague who is now at NYU. She basically started from a problem that is well established in literature on online discussions and support collaborative learning. That in many cases for learners who need solid argument, they need to read to other students' comments and then construct their arguments based on the previous knowledge. That is also quite consistent with the theory, well-established theory of computers support collaborative learning and the work that was done by Jerry Stoll, which also indicates while we are making our arguments and we are making these kind of social distributions, we also need to build on the work of others. But it's also equally established problem in the literature that these discussion boards become really big, very crowded spaces, and students have a hard time to find a relevant other message that they need to read based on which they can draw their points. So she then created a dashboard which would help the students to track which other arguments students read, and also which of these messages were topically relevant for them to consider before they were making their posts. So she deployed this type of dashboard to their students. And then she then found that not only did the students kind of engage with these discussions more effectively, but also when they analyze qualitatively the kind of discussions, they also found much more evidence in terms of the higher levels of knowledge construction and argumentation students were making when they were using these type of approaches versus when they didn't have this type of opportunity. So this is just to prove the point. Dashboards are not necessarily wrong. However, they need to be designed in such a way that they are fitting the tasks that are relevant to promote. And this really brings us to the point. Why we think that feedback has to be a diagram? Or even a broader question, why we think that visualization is always more powerful than anything else? The literature, for example, doesn't suggest that. Literature says, for example, there's theory of cognitive fit, which clearly suggests that we cannot make the generalizations whether certain data representation works best in general, but rather in connection to the particular type of task that we are trying to tackle. There's another critical theory as well, which is equally relevant here. This whole theory of technology task fit that indicates that learners or users in general are able to tolerate a bit of a hardness in terms of the ease of use particular technology for the benefit of the increased usefulness. In particular connections when they are dealing with complex tasks. And learning is a complex task. Therefore, our ease of use focus should not be, it should be really on the usefulness and relevance for particular types of tasks that we are trying to promote. But then I'm going to also try to kind of finalize my talk on a point that feedback in analytics can be communicated through text as well. And this is the type of work that I'm doing with a colleague from Australia on the larger part and another bigger team, in which we are trying to really use analytics to empower teachers and their learners rather than just provide dashboards to the teachers. So the idea is really that teachers, we need to think about the types of indicators that are relevant for their students in terms of the tasks. We also focus on the kind of regular cycles that are available in higher education for these. So what are those 2 to 4 or 5 tasks that students need to focus on? And then in one study, we really just said, well, these are the 5 indicators for each of these tasks, and then we just basically measured students' distribution across these indicators into quartiles. No really significant data science at all. Very simplistic type of an approach. Then we asked the students for each task, for each of these quartiles to provide a snippet of feedback. Nothing else. That was it. And then if teachers had 5 or 6 tasks that they could provide us. So it would be, I mean, scalability would be completely dependent on the number of tasks, not on the number of students. Then in the second phase, we would use the algorithm, fairly simple again, that would pretty much match the students' quartile with the relevant snippet of feedback, right? To compile personalized messages to students. Approach, we run a study in a cohort of students, about 450 that are taking a computer engineering course at the University of Sydney, and in a given week we'll get about 300 unique messages. And so these messages would look something like this. So the instructor would not really tell them anything about statistics. It would really be focused on the kind of problems that were identified for students, and also piece of advice that was relevant by the students in terms of the instruction that is relevant to them. We wanted to see what was the effect of this. The course itself had a challenge, as it is common, I think, in many institutions in higher education, of students not really happy with feedback that they are getting. That feedback is typically kind of very late, communicated by teaching staff, and not really kind of addressing some of their pressing needs on a regular basis. So we decided in 2013 to administer it only for 4 weeks. In the week before, in the year before 2014, we introduced the dashboard. So you can see the effects. So 2014 was the dashboard. No significant difference. Feedback was pretty much the same. Perception of feedback by students was the same as it was in the previous years as well. But then when we introduced this type of feedback to students for only 4 years, for only 4 weeks, they really appreciated how it went up for half standard deviation, which is quite considerable in educational research, and also went from 3.3 to 2.85. But what was also more interesting is when we looked into the digital traces, what type of activities students spend more time on was online when we administer this type of feedback. They would spend more time both on going back, looking what were the original chapters inside of the courses, and secondly, they also used more of the dashboard itself. There's the irony, isn't it? So they used more, but they actually found the value of using those things and used kind of these dashboards as a kind of relevant reference training. But once they got the kind of guidance as well how to do it. So these are the really critical things that tells an important story. We should not be obsessed about the representation itself. We should really kind of primarily focus on what we are trying to achieve and what is the task. So the technology will be from September available as open source. It's called OnTask. It's just URL is ontasklearning.org, and feel free to check it out. Right, enough. Your final remarks, and I'm done. First of all, I hope I made a point that learning analytics is more than data science. Data science is a critical component of learning analytics, but equally important are theory and design for the success of learning analytics and to make any impact in practice. About dimensions of privacy and ethics, we need to consider elements of design and theory. For example, one of the most influential works on privacy and ethics in education, learning analytics research is by Paul Priestwood and Sharon Slade. And it also looked a lot into the literature of student agents and the way how we are making certain data private or not. Equally, if you are talking about presenting data in dashboards, if something is proven to be negative, you also need to think about kind of theoretical implications, whether something is relevant or not, in terms of ethics of what we are doing with learning analytics or not. And it really tells us one critical dimension. When we are considering data science, theory, and design, that really means that learning is highly multidisciplinary. And we need to have teams that are able to tackle those problems. In particular, teams that can kind of emerge into the complexity of the educational systems, rather than to think about very quick and dirty technological fixes that usually don't work in education. And that's it. Thanks very much for your attention. I appreciate it.
You can take questions on the next video recording. Yeah, a few minutes of questions.